Hello and welcome to Candidates on the Clock, sponsored by the Newton County Chamber of Commerce. I'm your host, Lanier Sims. Today we're joined by Incumbent Shakila Henderson-Baker, that is running for Newton County Board of Education, District 3. Ms. Henderson-Baker, can you tell the voters a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lanier. So I am Shakila Henderson-Baker. I'm running for the District 3 up for re-election for the District 3 Board of Education seat. I currently am the board chair for this year. I am a parent of two wonderful girls in our school system. I am the spouse of an educator for our school system. I have a bachelor's degree in political science from Fort Valley State University, where I went on academic scholarship. I have a master's degree in counseling and psychology from Troy University. And prior to running for the board, and while I was in my first year on the board, I actually went back to school for early childhood education to do an add-on at Piedmont College in Athens. I am a product of our school system, and not only am I the parent of those two wonderful girls, but I claim myself to be a parent of all the kids in our school system, as I'm always actively out and about in the community and going to school system events to support them. So that's a little bit about me. I also serve as president-elect of the Georgia School Board Association, which is the #1 training organization and association that all school board members fall up under in the state of Georgia. It's also the #1 policy advocate for Georgia school board members across the state as well.
Okay, thank you. As you know, we had citizens to submit questions, not only for Newton County as a whole, but there are some questions that are directly tied to your district. So the first question, I guess everybody's seen recent news of what was going on at Druid Hills High School up in Atlanta. The question is, given the recent issues at Druid Hills, what would you do to ensure proper and regular inspections in all Newton County schools?
So make sure we're up to date on our facilities plan. The state of Georgia and the Department of Education actually requires school systems to have a facility plan. And in that requirement, they actually have outside individual composed of superintendents, deputy directors from other school systems that come in and evaluate your schools. They look at the HVAC system, they look at school roofs, all of those things. And so you want to make sure that your director of facilities or your chief of operations are constantly bringing those plans forward, and you want to look at the schools that are supposed to have improvements made. The other thing you want to do as a board, as a whole board, you want to make sure the whole board supports those plans and the improvements that need to be made and really understand that. So you want to constantly ask questions in that area, but that is required. So to be honest with you, it is a tragedy that got overlooked in that school system. Okay. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. Next question. What do you believe is the greatest hindrance to a better statewide school ranking in our county, and what would be your plan to address it?
The hindrance is a lack of understanding in the community of what that is composed of. So let's use the current ranking and the history behind it. And that's a long answer because of the history behind it. But the ranking, the A through F ranking, comes from the Governor's Office of Student Achievement. And years back, when the Governor's Office of Student Achievement was established, it was under the direction of Governor Deal. So we also have to remember that Governor Deal is also the governor that pushed for that opportunity school district, where the opportunity school district, somebody outside of the community would take over failing schools. So the whole purpose of the Governor's Office of Student Achievement was to take over failing schools. So if I know that that's my department whole purpose, then I'm not going to have fair practices when it comes to measurement. So the other thing is that score, actually 80% of that score is testing. So you're talking about assessing a school and giving a school a grade based on, if you take all the time frames that they take tests, like the milestones, based on 2 days worth of testing. That's not a fair accountability measure for school systems to measure 180 days on a 2-day scoring. And so what you have is people see that score and they think, oh, this school district is off. awful, but school districts were challenged to tell their true story up under our new governor, up under the new state Superintendent Woods, after all of that happened. They said these are not true measures of your school. This does not tell the story of what you're doing 180 days a year. Georgia Association of Educators said the same thing, as well as GSBA. And so school districts are challenged to tell that true story through social media postings, through telling about your accolades, to constantly putting out productions and publications, to helping people understand that your students are much more than a 2-day score, which is completely unfair. And so that's one of the things that is a big hindrance, just a lack of understanding where it comes from.
Okay, thank you. Next question is probably a little bit more district related, but do you believe that the educational resources are equally distributed amongst all the districts?
To be honest with you, no. So I'm gonna be honest, I don't. There is work to do. I think we try to do that. I think when it comes to some resources, we have to realize what equity is, and equity doesn't look the same for everybody. And I think that's the problem. So when you have one district saying, I need some more things added over here, you may have other districts that do not understand that, and they look at it from a perspective as you're always putting things or trying to put things or programs on that side, and so we don't have this on this side, and so you can't look at it from that perspective. I can give you some specific examples with programming in terms of, let's look at transportation to special programs. So our STEM program, which is great, and our college career academy, which is great, it currently has transportation. So kids get transported by our school buses to those programs. But then you have the Alana's program over at Newton High School, and parents have to provide transportation to that program. However, it's a special program just like STEM and the college and career academy. So when we look at a fair balance, is that fairly balanced? No, because you got one side that they have to provide transportation, but you got another program that they don't. And so you lose students in that other program because parents are having to do that. Even with dual enrollment. So you have dual enrollment at the College Career Academy, which is great, but our other 3 high schools, and when I say that, they actually have people that come over and teach. They have a partnership, and the kids mostly have transportation. But at our other 3 high schools, there's not somebody coming inside of the building, and the kids don't have as much transportation because they're staying at the school all day, and so you don't have as many dual enrollment students in the other 3 high schools. And so again, that's all about resources. So we're getting there. Those things are being addressed all the time, looking for avenues to make it equitable across the district. But you got to have honest conversations, and that's why I said I'm gonna be honest and say no.
Okay. I skipped a few questions because I want to follow up with your answers from this one. So another question was, what will you do to encourage parent involvement in the schools, especially the schools that are 30 minutes plus bus rides away from home? Kids from the western side of the county, I'm saying, I would guess, going to Alcovey. And would you consider redistricting?
Okay, so let me answer the second one first.
Okay.
Would I consider redistricting? Yes, I would, because currently the lines are drawn for, a lot of people don't know why the lines are drawn. So Alcovey, when Alcovey was built, it was built in an area that at that time frame, that board, I wasn't on that board, but that board at that time frame, that's where they told that growth was going to be. And so they built the high school out there with the prediction that growth was going to be, preparing for students to come out there in that area, where growth kind of slowed down. So once you spend taxpayer money building a school for 2,200 students, and you got 1,800 students in there, you got to find some more students in that building, or else people are going to complain. So that's why you have areas like the silos off of Brown Bridge that go all the way to Alcovey, which is far, because you got to fill in the spaces. So now that we have a new replacement high school coming, which is East Side, and then Newton is almost to the max itself, you got to look at redistricting, to be honest, at some point to make an even shift and also cut down on that transportation time. And that's one of the ways you get parents involved. Another way you get parents involved, parents come to see their kids. You got to have programs where their kids are going to be showcased. A lot of times when we have programs at the high school level, is meetings. Well, at that, to be honest with you, by that time frame, parents are exhausted. They're working. You know, parents show up. That's always been the history. They show up when they're babies at elementary taking pictures. They want to see those babies. We got to have that same concept in high school. They want to see their children. And so in order to get the parents in there, when you want to meet with the parents about special things, Title I, anything like that, you need to showcase your kids.
Right.
You need to showcase the kids so that they'll come and see that. And save that part for the end. Give the information up front so that they stay the entire time, and then showcase those kids. Show what's going on. Again, telling that story of the great things you're doing in your individual school.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What do you believe should be done with the American Rescue Act funds? I believe it for you guys is ESSER?
ESSER.
ESSER. What do you believe should be done with those funds to increase the success of our students?
Focus on learning loss. Kids lost a lot in those 2 years. Again, just being honest. So one of the reasons, and that's not local, that's not statewide, that's nationwide. There are learning losses across the country because one thing, no one was prepared. So teachers didn't know how to teach in a virtual environment. The other thing is no one knew how long kids would be in and out of school, and you were constantly shuffling kids in and out. So they missed those standards and that core instruction. And so you gotta have avenues and you gotta have programs that talk about learning loss. You need summer enrichment, number one, to make up for those learning losses. You need to build in programs inside of the schools or extra time frame inside of the schools to focus on those learning loss. You need to assess the school, the students, to determine what their weaknesses are. So what do they lose in, whether it's reading, science, math, figure those things out. The other thing is you got to make up for testing as well. So kids hadn't been taking tests. So they're not accustomed to taking tests for the last 2 years. That's including at the high school level, ACT and SAT. A lot of colleges are now not requiring it. So you got to figure, since tests are now coming back, how to get kids back accustomed to taking tests. Because what we know is because they lost in that as well, they're not going to be used to that. Social, emotional behaviors and learning things, you got to focus on that area as well. Kids weren't around other kids, they weren't around adults. So when we opened back up this past year, where it was majority students back in school, they didn't know how to act around each other because they weren't used to being in an environment where they had to mesh with other people outside of their home. So you got to focus on that as well. So you need to put those programs in place, but most importantly, those funds are only guaranteed for a certain time frame. So now after you put all those programs in place, when those funds run out, the problems are still going to exist. Those disparities are still there. You got to figure out funding to continue the programs on your own as an independent school system.
Okay, thank you. Next question is a two-part. I'll go ahead and go through both of them. There's a huge increase in property values. Will you commit, or what is your thoughts on lowering the millage rate? And also, will you consider decreasing school property taxes for those over 65?
Okay, yes and yes. So easy said, that's easy said, yes and yes. And sometimes things are easy said, but I got actions to prove it. So this past year, we had the option of doing our millage rate. So 2 years ago, we did the millage rate at 19.78, lowering it from that 20 mills. This past year, 21, when we had our millage rate meetings, we had the options to use 19.78, 18.28, and 17 something. And so we had a heavy, heated conversation, but after seeing the tax digest had gone up, we got to be fair to our taxpayers. We're getting more money in because property value has gone up. So we got to have some form of relief for the taxpayers. And so we had the option to do 19.78, 18.28, or 17 won something. And I was one of 3 board members that voted for that 18.28. And I will say, I'll be honest, you had somebody else that wanted 19.78. But you have to have an honest conversation and be fair. If the taxpayers are giving us what we need to give them something back. The senior citizen, now that the houses are being appraised at a higher value, unfortunately, even though we did our part by lowering it to 18.28, nobody saw a break because your property value is higher, so you didn't get a chance to get anything from that 18.28 down. And so you gotta now, the tax digest is up, you're able to provide relief for your senior citizens with the property values being appraised up. I think too, senior citizens don't know some of the options that they have, and so educating them on the options and the appeal process as well goes along with it. But yeah, and the tax is probably going to continue to increase, so you got to provide relief.
Okay. All right. The next question is something I hear a lot over the years. With all the success that we've had in the last few years with student athletes, going to college, D1 scholarships, kids are going to school a lot on athletic scholarships. The question is, do you believe the Board of Education is properly funding our athletic programs?
Honest?
I am one of those people that constantly, so everything that I've been honest about, I have brought to the attention of our executive leadership team and our superintendent. So I'm going to tell you something real quick in this time frame that happened a couple of years ago. I was in Leadership, Georgia in 2018, and we went down to Colquitt County to visit their athletic program because they're the school system that have the awesome indoor facility, and they get a lot of D1 athletes. And at that time frame, the controversial Coach Frost was the coach there, and one of the things he talked about was having career and college counselors strictly for athletes in the Colquitt County School District, which I thought was amazing because he said a lot of the kids end up getting prep offers. And if a kid gets a prep offer, and we've seen those, if a kids get a prep offer, that means that at some point we have failed them. And here is why. They're getting an offer to go to a prep school because their scores are not high enough or their grades are not good enough. And so for me, that says that we have an issue that we cheer for this student, whether male or female, at games. We supported them. We were so excited for them, but yet we didn't get them there where they're ready for the next steps. And so you got to do, I have talked about this, having a counselor strictly for student athletes across the district. I think that would help tremendously because when I saw a couple of our athletes sign into prep schools, I actually asked the superintendent, do you know what this means? And so at that point, I think she didn't understand what it meant. And when I painted that picture, we began to have a conversation of looking at some things. The other thing is you have to tap in students' innate qualities and in their innate intelligence. And not every student is academic, just an academic student, a stellar student, but they may have a combination of things, academics and athleticism, and that's still a form of intelligence. And so if we want to see our students successful, which our school system mission is educational excellence for all students, then we got to tap into and contribute to those things that's going to help them get there. So yeah, we definitely need to invest in our athletes a little bit more. I think that counseling, having a athletic counselor across the district for everyone will tremendously help them. So
okay, thank you. Next question is 3 parts to it. What do you think about CRT, critical race theory, school choice, and parent rights?
okay, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
That is. So somebody's watching the legislative session. That's what I keep telling people. So CRT, let me start there. First of all, is not a K through 12 curriculum. So it's not taught in K through 12. But what they did, and the State Board of Education last year issued a statement about CRT. I don't know why they did that because it's not taught in K through 12 schools. But this past year in the legislative session, a House bill came up and it's called Divisive Concepts. And it touched on a lot of similar things that CRT did. And that House bill did end up passing. Will Wade was the author of that bill. Will Wade actually served in GSBA with me when I was a district director before I became president-elect. Ironically, Will is a former Board of Education member from Dawson City Schools, an area that is not high in minority population. And so I think his purpose of writing that bill is a lack of understanding of what it's really composed of. It is sad that it passed. I'll be honest, that's how I feel, because you're not really teaching divisive concepts. So what that bill says is that you can't teach that one race is superior over the other. But because it passed, now local boards have to react. So that's something that a Board of Education member has to do, and I think a lot of people don't understand what exactly a board member does. So that policy, and there's a timeline attached to it. So now that that passed, it has to go to the State Board of Education. The State Board of Education has to come up with a policy and an appeal system for parents to appeal if they feel like something is being taught that shouldn't be taught. Same thing with books, that's a different bill, but same approach. Once it sits on the table for 30 days at the State Board of Education, then school systems can write a policy. Then our policy has to sit on the table for 30 days to allow public input, and then it passes. But the timeline that they attach to some of these bills is unrealistic, so I don't know how it's going to work out, but you have to react and you have to make a process for people to appeal. And I get it. I get people are afraid of what their students may learn or what their individual child may learn. But at the same time, some of these things, when these kids go off to college, there's no divisive concept that takes those same subject areas with history or with books out of college courses. So then my thought process is that anybody think about we may be unpreparing our students for the next level by not teaching them at this level. Mm-hmm. So I think that was a conversation that was needed in those areas. So, okay. but you gotta make those rules and those policies that apply to it now.
Okay. School choice.
School choice. Schools need to have choices. If you're talking about that, if you're talking about school choice in terms of money following kids, if they go to a private school, which one are you talking about? Because school choice applies to both.
Right.
You want me to hit both
yes,
of them?
Please do.
Okay. So the dollars following kids if they go to a private school. So a lot of every year charter schools come up against the legislation session to try to get school funding to follow their child if they go to a charter school or to a private school. In the long run, public schools end up hurting. You got to think of public schools like a business. In a business, you invest in it. The more money you invest in it, the better it is. So when you take money out of that business, then you're not getting what you probably need to make that business grow. I understand dollars following the child, but now they're coming up with bills where a certain amount of dollars that's unfair to public school kids can follow the child. But not only that, there are no standards or no testing or no assessment or no grades put in place for those dollars following those kids. Whereas for us, for school systems, we have grades attached to us. We have assessments attached to us. So that's not fair. So if they can come up with a fair process, I don't mind that. The same applies for special needs students. I understand with special needs students, dollars following them, because some school systems don't have the resources to give to special needs students that they need to. So they may be better in a private environment. Our school system is not that way, but you have school systems in southern Georgia that lack a lot of resources, and I just know that through GSBA in terms of, so that's with dollars following students in school choice. So if they have accountability measures, I'm good with that, but there's not accountability measures in place. So as long as there's no accountability measures in place, it's not fair for K-12 public education. Now, in terms of school choices in the school system, I think everybody knows and hears me at board meetings how many times I say we gotta have choices, we gotta have choices, we gotta have choices. We have to have choices. Going back to what I said about athletes, you gotta be able to tap in kids' innate qualities and in their innate talents. And so not every child is an academic course subject student. So your choice comes in the College Career Academy with over 20 programs over there that train kids to be ready for business and industry or be work ready time they come out of high school, or STEM program that trains those kids that are geared in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Where we lack in school choice is in the arts and the liberal arts category. That's something that I've said for years. I think we are trying to get there. We're in the midst of having a conversation about it and trying to develop a program. But if we have great K through 12 STEM programming, then why don't we have great K through 12 art programming. And we have kids that are really gifted in that area. So if you do it for K through 8 with STEM, every elementary and middle having that STEM curriculum, then you got to fairly have art, liberal arts, that's inclusive of band, music, chorus, a true program in K through 8. And that's about creating equity in the district. But not only that, tapping in kids' natural talents. When kids do things they love, here's the great thing about choices: when they do things they love, then those other weaknesses they have in academics improve. And that's evidence-based. And that's been proven in tons of studies. So you got to have those things in place with choices within the school system. So you're always keeping the attentiveness of the students.
Last one was parent rights.
Parent rights. Woo! So parent rights, another bill that passed, that you got to create a policy for. Parents always had the right to review curriculum ahead of time, so that was the thing. But I think sometimes national topics get in parents' ear, and they fear they don't have that right and really don't understand the things that already exist. So it's a policy that has to be developed. But basically, you're basically saying parents have the right to look at curriculum, to look at anything that is obscene, nudity, anything like that, sex ed, any of those core subject areas, and see what's going to be taught and give them that option to opt out. We always really had that option in sex education, but this goes beyond sex education. So this could even be with books. I think of just some books that may have to do with just some controversial books in the past. To Kill a Mockingbird, one of those books that's read at the high school level, and just controversial because it deals with race and during a time when segregation existed and stuff. And so those might be one of those things that parents can pull out. The thing about with the appeal process, though, the parent has to be a parent of that school and of that grade level. So it's not just like any stakeholder can say, I want this done, or I want to see this ahead of time. But what I think a lot of people do not realize is, and at the end, it may actually be taxing on the educators, because now you kind of got to provide some of the things that you're going to do in that classroom or to that principal. So you're putting extra work in when you really just want to teach.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for answering all the top questions that citizens submitted. At this time, can you close us out with any further information you'd like the voters to know about yourself or your campaign? Also, how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so closing out, I just want the voters to know that you can easily get in contact with me through my website. It's www.henderson-baker.com. My cell number is a public number, is published. You can call the school board and get it, but it's 770-853-9614. And I want people to just understand that I've always been a voice at the table, not being ashamed to speak up. I've always been somebody out and about in the community that's passionate about our kids. And most importantly, I always kind of portrayed myself as a public servant or a community servant and not a politician, and there's a reason behind that. I want people to know that I'm an individual just like you, that's passionate about our students and our students' future. I want people to know that I'm really somebody who comes vested in positions and at the table. So I take my time to gain the knowledge so that I can be the best person for you. And I hope that you've seen that through some of the things that I've done, whether it's implementing or fighting or advocating for true mental health counselors in our school system, to have a partnership there, or advocating for creating art programs, or simply just advocating for some of the things that you guys asked for during the pandemic or during trying times. So I hope those things that I have done have pleased you, and I look forward to continuing to work for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.